Well, hello, this is Big Ed with Big Ed's Trucking News. This is a channel I've been thinking about putting together for a little while. I'll give you some backstory. I've held a CDL since May of 1977. Back in those days, it was called a chauffeur's license. And then it went to Class 1, then it went to Class A, and now it's what you all know as your CDL. I've hauled just about everything there is to haul with the exception of stuff that makes you glow in the dark. I've never hauled livestock. And let's see, and I've never ever wanted to be a bed bug hauler. I wanted to start this channel for advice. You guys can leave whatever questions you may have in the comment section on just about anything. I've driven in every state in the lower 48. Now, I've never been up into Alaska or through Canada. Didn't want to. I don't want to be an ice road trucker. But I have driven. My last job, I drove for a company for off and on for 22 years here in the state of Georgia. I worked in their safety department. I've also worked in dispatch at times, not with the company I just left, or I just retired from, but other companies I worked in dispatch. So I understand this business from both sides of the desk. So anyway, I just thought I would try to bring you pertinent news and my experience to the forefront. Like I said, I first started learning to drive, well, I've had my license since May of '77. And I ran team with my wife from '97 until her passing this last May, which had nothing to do with trucking. She just basically had a blood clot. And anyway, that's just a whole different story. So I got off the truck for a while and decided a little time for myself, but at the same time I wanted something to do. So I thought I could reach out to the drivers out there across this country and pass on any knowledge and experience that I might have, that I might be able to help you in any way that I can. Like I said, in the description box, or not the description box, but in the comment section, please just leave any of your questions about anything in trucking. And if I don't know the answer, I will find out. I first started hauling hay when I was a kid, by hand. We're not talking about like you see it today with squeezes and forklifts and all that kind of stuff. We loaded this stuff by hand with a boom loader, sometimes with an elevator. I hauled hay into the dairies. I've loaded hay in the Sacramento Valley when it was 115 to 118 degrees. Even in Blythe one time, I remember loading hay when we started. It was just, it was just starting to get dark, not dark, but sun was getting ready to go down. And it was nearly 120 degrees. You don't want to load hay in Blythe, California in the daytime because there was temperatures there 122 degrees. I've also loaded hay in Merrill, Oregon. I don't know if you guys, well, some of you might be old enough, but Merrill, Oregon, I remember I believe it was either 82 or 83, would have been January or February. And I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember that game that the Cincinnati Bengals played against the San Diego Chargers in Cincinnati, Ohio. And they almost called the game that day because the wind chill factor was 59 below zero. Well, that same day, my cousin and I were loading hay in Merrill, Oregon. And brother, it was 49 below zero. And we were outside in the elements. And those days I had hair on my head and a full beard. And I had icicles hanging all out of my hair while we loaded that hay. We're talking about 50 ton of hay, 2 truck and trailer loads. Took us all day to load it. I've loaded steel and elements that I don't even want to take the time to remember. So I have been there and I have done that. As no brag, as just fact. But I'd like to be able to reach out and help any one of you that's either thinking about getting into trucking or is out there today. You know, if you're a person that's only been behind the wheel for a short time, reach out. Reach out and ask me any question. And I will do my very best to be able to give you the best information that I have. Now, I know that a lot of you, if you've been paying attention out there, trucking business is getting a little, The one thing about the trucking business that I found in my lifetime, that no matter how bad things get, they're still going to have truck drivers. So if you're in the trucking industry, if you're a driver in the industry, as long as you maintain a good CDL and a good driving record, you know how many points on your license, there is no time in history where a driver could not get a job, period, if he wanted a job. I know trucking can be hard. You're away from home, you're away from your children, you're away from your wife, if you're married. But it also can be a good paying job. I know everything that I have in my life has been because of trucking. And I don't regret it, not one bit. I've driven in the ice and snow. I've driven in the heat. I mean, I've driven in every element that you can think of. But anyway, I don't know if you guys saw where Yellow Freight filed for bankruptcy. And I did a little digging into that because I noticed that Congress, and like I said, this channel is nothing to do with politics. I'll tell you how it is, but it ain't got nothing to do with politics. I'm not going to take a stand one side or the other, either Republican or Democrat or anything else. This is about trucking and the trucking industry. But anyway, the government has set out to save Yellow Freight. And I sit there and I started digging into it, you know. During the COVID thing, they got $700 million in loans. And right now, what that they're trying to do to save this company, and I'm not worried so much about the company, I'm worried about the 22,000 people that are going to lose their jobs. Now those drivers, for the most part, or at least the drivers for the most part, will be able to find jobs in other, because if a company like Yellow Freight goes down, there's got to be somebody come in here and pick up the slack. Okay, because they are a major haul for Walmart and for Home Depot. But not to get political, but one of the things that I noticed, because there's both Democrats and Republicans that are trying to save Yellow Freight, and that's good. But some of the people that are really pushing it are the unions. Simply because when Yellow Freight goes down, there's going to be 22,000 union jobs. That if some other companies fill those holes, I'm talking about, they may not necessarily be union. So I guarantee you the union, you know, like Teamsters and those guys, are beating on the doors of halls of Congress to get a little bit of action. But anyway, you remember the shooter up in Maine. And like I said, this isn't political. I'm just talking about things that affect drivers. But the shooter in Maine actually worked at one time at the Lewiston, Maine, at the Walmart DC in that area. And the thing that was kind of crazy, any of you that have delivered to Walmart, to a DC, know just exactly how big a pain in the butt it can be. How many times have you sat there for hours? You get there and you get in a door, and 8 hours later you might still be there. I think the fastest I ever got out of a Walmart DC was one in Monroe, Georgia. I think I was in there for about 2 hours, and that's the fastest that I've ever gotten in and out of a Walmart DC. But anyway, this Walmart DC in Lewiston, Maine, when that shooting went down, they locked the place down. They locked the Walmart DC down. Drivers couldn't get in or out for I don't know how many hours. Of course, people going to Walmart, drivers going to Walmart, should be used to the fact that you're going to be shut down while you're there. Just saying. Like I said, I'm going to add a little humor to a lot of this stuff too. Here's a story up Pueblo, Colorado. And this is something, I'm going to go back to, most of you probably don't remember the earthquake that hit California back in, it was 92, I believe, 1992. And I'll tell you a little funny, to get into this story I'm going to talk about Pueblo, it's nothing to do with an earthquake, but it does have to do with the driver getting killed. But back in 1992, they had a big earthquake down there, and overpasses fell down and everything else. And what was really, I'm not going to say funny about that, but normally I ran at that time, I would leave on on Sunday, and I would deliver in LA on Monday, and then I would leave on Thursday or Wednesday and leave on do 2 trips a week out of from Eureka, California down into the Los Angeles area. And that particular week, when those earthquakes happened, the Friday before that, my truck broke down, the one I normally drive. And the company I was working for at the time was Don Nolan Trucking out of Fortuna, California. And the company I was working for that time, they gave me a truck and trailer to drive, old cab over truck and trailer. And I took a load and I delivered down to Sacramento. I can't remember which lumber yard it was, but it was a lumber yard in Sacramento, California. And while we're sitting there on the news about this major earthquake that happened, and one of the overpasses that fell down was one that I slept underneath almost every time when I would go into Los Angeles. Before I went into town like 4 o'clock in the morning to beat traffic. Because see, when I would leave my house, by the time I would get there, I would be out of hours. And I always slept in this one spot. Now my truck broke down, and that particular overpass fell down exactly where I would sleep. And you're going to say, what's this got to do with Pueblo, Colorado? Well, let me tell you. A driver, I don't know if he was sleeping or what the situation was, but he was by an overpass, a train overpass. And this train derailed right there. And the train came off the top of that overpass and fell on top of him and killed him. Now, I don't know if he just happened to be there at the wrong time. Well, obviously he was there at the wrong time. But did he just drive underneath the overpass, or was he parked there? And there was know your surroundings as a driver. Like I said, this channel is going to be about advice. And anytime I see a story, I'm going to pick it apart and try to give you the best advice that I can. Don't park around overpasses. When there's tornadoes, don't go up underneath a overpass. I know you probably heard that a lot of times. But anyway, like I was saying, be mindful of where you park or where of what's going on around you at all times. Here we go. A truck out of Monterrey, Mexico. And we're not talking about New Mexico, we're talking about Mexico. Now, we all know about drugs coming across the border. And right now our borders are like an open sieve, but I'm not going to get into that. But at the same time, this driver out of Monterrey, Mexico, comes into Texas. Anyway, they find 27 kilos of cocaine. But this is the whole thing. They had modified, this is a flatbed. So they had modified the axles on that truck so they could hide cocaine in that. Now this goes back to a personal story, not personal, but I'm just going to give you something that I knew about. We're talking way back in the 70s. I knew a person that owned a truck and company out of Sacramento. Of course, they spent time in jail for distribution of cocaine. But they literally had a box that was welded up in the frame of a flatbed. That's the reason why this story caught my eye. And there was cocaine that got transported in that truck. And the way it was hidden was pretty. Now today with everything that they've got, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that this guy didn't get away with it, but I am surprised at the thought process that went in to modify those axles. The only way they found that is because a dog found it. But it does go back to like I say, when I read these things, I go back to something that's personal, or that I personally know about throughout the ages of driving. And I remember this one particular flatbed that they had welded up a box up into the frame. It had 2 locks on it. The reason why I know about it is because we saw it on the pit when the cops finally caught him. And you can see, when they got one of the guys doing some, greasing the truck on the pit. This was in Corning, California. They looked up in there and what the hell's that box? Then there was a little bit of white powder somehow got, found its way there, let's just say. Anyway, they called the local sheriff's department, and that was the end of that particular mule. Just saying. Anyway, states are taking a survey from drivers, okay, from winter driving on I-90 and I-94. Now, let me tell you something. I've been on I-90 and I've been on I-94, and I've been there in the dead of winter when it's been 20 below zero. Hell, I've been in Fargo. Well, of course, I've been in Fargo when it's been minus 65. I mean, it was minus 55, I think, one time when I was there fueling at a TA. And I literally had one of those terrorist masks on. Every flipping piece of clothing. It was really kind of funny. I had bought this jacket at a TA. It only cost me $10 because that jacket had a tear in it. But that was the warmest damn jacket I ever had. I still got that jacket. Buddy, I hate the cold. I hate the cold worse than anything. But they're asking drivers their opinion about I-90 and I-94. Let me tell you something. Now, I know that the deadliest highways in the country, or in the United States, are up in Alaska, at least according to their statistics. But to me, the deadliest stretch of road, where you see it looks like a frickin' truck, it looks like a graveyard in the wintertime. And that's between Cheyenne, Wyoming and Rock Springs, Wyoming on Interstate 80. Man, I'll tell you what, I've been across there times when there shouldn't have been nobody out there. But they're asking for opinions. For me, one of the things that I would do, the minute it gets to a certain level, and they can figure out what level that is, there should be highway patrol fully chained up with four-wheel drives that pace car everybody. And what I mean by that is, in the bad areas, they get out in front of the entire traffic, and they don't let traffic move more than about 25 miles an hour until they get out of the area that's that bad. Now, that's my opinion. That's how I figure it ought to be done. I can remember one time up on Cabbage Hill in Oregon on I-84, my wife and I chained. Up there, it was minus 10. The only thing that saved our butt that day was the fact that there was no wind. But buddy, you go down off of Cabbage when it's icy. They're on I-84. And you're going to have some fun, let's just say. But that's my advice. If you want to ask the driver what I think, anytime when the weather gets to a certain point, they should have a fully chained up, four-wheel drive, highway patrol, state patrol, sheriff's department, doesn't matter. And they should take traffic at a certain speed, and don't let nobody pass. You just go out through there, get 2 lanes. That way, if somebody does spin out, and you got another lane you can get over into. But that's how I would do it. And that's after the plows have went through. But that's just my advice. I don't know if you guys remember early in the middle of October, I don't know if it was 23rd, 24th, big pileup on I-55 down there between I-12 and I-10 in Louisiana, there in New Orleans. I don't know how many trucks were involved in that, and I don't know how many people died, and I don't know how many people got injured. I know that was a ton. There was a bunch of fog down there. And that's another thing, too. When it gets that bad, people, you got to slow down. And that's the biggest problem with ice and snow, is people don't slow down. I'll tell you another funny story, too, when we talk about ice and snow. I remember one time I was going across I-80. I believe I was wasn't Nebraska. Yeah, it might have been Nebraska. And I'm out there and I'm driving a flatbed. I'm doing about 40, I'm fully loaded. I'm doing about 40 miles an hour. And this guy gets on the radio, "You want to get out of my way, roller skate?" Okay. So anyway, I just kind of moved over a little bit so he could go around me. He come flying around me. He must have been doing 60 miles an hour in that ice. And I mean, there was 2 inches of ice on that road. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched Roadrunner and the Coyote, but when that guy went by me, and the next thing you know, his truck started to jackknife and folded up. And when it folded up, it literally it folded up and spun all the way around to where his cab was facing my cab. And I could look right at him in his window. And I'll never forget this as long as I live, because I remember the Roadrunner and Coyote, and I looked over at him. Remember every time the Coyote caught hell and gets smashed by a rock, and the Roadrunner would go, or the Coyote would, when he was about to get screwed, he'd just go like this, he'd wave. When I looked at that guy in that window, I looked right out at him and I just went like this. Because we were, I was only doing about 40 miles an hour. And when that thing folded up and his cab was facing mine, then he went off the road. I just got lucky. I got lucky. Went off the road and he slid right down into the median there. Or not the median, but down in the ditch on the side. But I'll never forget that as long as I live. Boys and girls, when you're driving out there on the ice and snow, 45 mile an hour should be as fast as you're going, in my opinion. But anyway, in that fog out there, when we get back to I-55, I'll get off on a tangent all the time. The northbound lanes are going to be closed. Right now, the fact is, right now, when I look at my map, right now that's all closed between Interstate 10 and Interstate 12, I-55. So if you got to be around down there, you might want to remember that that's what's going on. Okay, one last thing for the day is deadliest crash states in the United States. Well, right now it says a group, this is a story out of Truckers News. Group identifies deadliest states for truck crashes. They call for action, okay? Anyway, there's a new report from a national safety advocacy organization. Now, I'm not going to say they're right or wrong, but I'll tell you what, when you start having a bunch of wrecks in certain states, pretty soon the federal government's going to take notice because people are screaming and yelling. It's just like whenever they shut certain highways off because they don't want trucks on it, like 580 around Oakland Hills, and you got to go all the way down and around. There's no reason you can't get on 580 as far as a truck going that way. But there's certain people with a lot of money that don't want to hear the trucks. So guess what? You don't got to go that way. You got to go 280 and 880. But anyway, this has finally gotten the attention. Now, these rates that I'm going to give you right now are based on 100,000 population. Okay? New Mexico has 4.2 traffic deaths in that state per 100,000 population. Then you got Arkansas's 3.8, Mississippi 3.6, Montana 3.4, Oklahoma 3.4, Wyoming 3.3, which surprises me. I thought it'd be higher than that. And I think the only reason why is because there's not that much traffic that goes through Wyoming. There's a lot of traffic on I-80 and I-90, and even up, I-80 and I-90. Let's see, no, just I-80. But anyway, but it's not as populated. So probably less deaths simply because it's very sparsely populated in Wyoming. Alabama 3.0, Louisiana 2.9, Nebraska 2.9, Kentucky 2.8, South Carolina 2.8, and Texas 2.7. Anyway, the national average is only 1.7. So basically right now, these steps that this organization wants the federal government to do, it says the Department of Transportation and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration must expeditiously finalize its automatically emergency braking rule for all classes of CMVs. Okay? That's going to be fun. Anytime the government gets more deeply involved in stuff, it makes it less fun. Well, I'm not going to say less fun. But sometimes you got pointy-headed pencil pushers that really know nothing about the trucking industry. And they're the ones out there making rules and laws. And that's the reason why I was kind of surprised when the government was asking drivers up on I-90 and I-94 for their opinion on what they thought. Kind of surprised me. It says, DOT, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, must expeditiously complete its speed limit rules for CMVs. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion on this. I don't think any CMV should be driving over 65 miles an hour. 65, 68. That's my opinion. I think at one time, Arkansas, it was 70 for cars and 65 for trucks. You want my personal opinion? That's the way it should be in every state in this country. 70 for cars and 65 for trucks. Period. Except for in areas where it's not safe to drive that fast. I mean, when you run into California, you've been running 70 plus miles an hour all the way across Arizona. And as soon as you hit that California border, you got to make an adjustment to 55 miles an hour. Now the law is 55 miles an hour. And here's something else you might want to think about, drivers. In the state of California, my brother used to be a highway patroller. In the state of California, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit is a felony. And you can lose your license and go to jail. If a cop out there stops you and you're doing 70 miles an hour, more than likely going to write you for 65 because he don't want to deal with the paperwork. But that is the law. In a lot of states, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit in a commercial vehicle is a felony. Period. Anyway, Congress must require DOT and NHTSA to conduct side underride guard impact testing. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm not going to go through everything they want it to do. All I know is it's going to be more government intervention into a situation by people with, like I said, that don't have a frickin' clue about what's going on in the trucking industry. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a video. I will try to come back at least every day or every other day with a little something about Truckers News, what's going on out there. Please leave some comments. Share this video. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. There isn't much in the trucking industry that I haven't done in my lifetime. And if I haven't done it, I know somebody who has. Anyway, thanks for watching. God bless each and every one of you. I want the best for you and I want the best for your families. Be safe out there and get back home to your family. This is Ed's Truckers News and Wisdom of the Day.